The concern is really high, and I think it reflects a concern that the Othan people, the tribe along the border, 90 plus miles, have for it as well. Their leadership and the community has said time and time again, we do not want a wall on our land. And what concerns me is fundamental issues of sovereignty, that trust responsibilities protected by the Constitution for Native tribes in this country. Something would have to be done to lift that historic understanding and right that tribes have to self-determination on their own land. And this is their own land. And it can be both a constitutional test, it can be a test against sovereignty, if the Othan, which I believe they will, continue to reject any effort to try to build any wall along that border.
I want to get your thoughts more broadly on immigration legislation. You have come out against the White House's immigration proposal. What would you want to see instead?
You know, I think we're to the point. After what happened in the Senate, and the leverage point on a must-pass legislation passed, and the CR was extended till the 8th, then I think that talking about doing something with DACA attached entirely to a must-pass piece of legislation, in this case a CR, I don't think that's going to have traction in the Senate, and it won't have traction in the House, given the makeup of the House as well. So I think that this issue of the Dreamers and the fix that needs to occur in law for DACA, I think that needs to be discrete and distinct. I'm worried in the House, in particular, layering on the Goodlatte-McSally legislation, which is all punitive. It's all about a $25 billion wall. It's all about 10,000 more agents. It's getting rid of the diversity visa, drastically cutting family unification, and those are non-starters for many of us. Hopefully, if the Republican majority in the House wants to debate that, let's do it as distinct and separate issues, but not dealing with at least any bipartisan effort that comes from the Senate that protects and codifies the Dreamers in this country. That should be the issue. But I'm afraid that this is a political opportunity to try to layer onto a DACA fix every onerous and extremist piece of enforcement and security strategies that they have not been able to pass on as standalone legislation in the past.
Polls have continued to show, as I know you're aware, that the majority of Americans are in favor of DACA protections. Why is it so difficult, you think, for Congress to pass something with respect to that one issue?
I think I think the Republican leadership, and certainly the White House and Miller and Kelly, see this as a viable political issue. As long as they can string it out, and poll numbers, if poll numbers reflect that this is a good strategy, they're going to keep it up and make immigration the wedge issue it's been in the last 2 elections. They see this as their only saving grace going into the midterms, given the record of this administration. But I think that the vast majority of American people want us to do the fair and right thing, and that is to permanently codify and protect the Dreamers. I think the issue now is that public will needs to be heard and felt here in Congress. Unfortunately, in the House, the Republican majority feels there's no consequences to them continuing to delay, continuing to sabotage any real effort to try to deal with the Dreamers.
You mentioned Miller and Kelly. That's Stephen Miller, one of the president's advisors, and then Chief of Staff John Kelly. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are, Congressman, on the president himself. Is he someone you think you can work with, the Democrats can work with on this issue of the Dreamers?
Well, given the track record, and his red meat to that extreme base of his constituency time and time again around the issue of immigration, around the issue of Latinos, introducing in that famous meeting in the White House the whole racial issue into how we do immigration in this country. Those all, and moving the goalposts one day after another, agree to something, then move the goalposts. Those are all patterns to me that don't endear any trust or any confidence that if he gives his word, that it's going to be kept. So I think it's important for the Senate to do their thing and for the House to do something that is fair and just for the Dreamers, and then put the pressure back on this administration to either sign it or not sign it. But for us to wait for the president, for us to get real clean, decent legislation from him, given the political calculations by Miller and Kelly, I don't think so.
California Democratic Congressman Pete Aguilar and Republican Congressman Will Hurd of Texas recently joined CBSN. Here's what Congressman Hurd said about a potential border wall. Let's take a listen.
I've been fairly clear that building a wall from sea to shining sea is the most expensive and least effective way to do border security. It's 2018, the technology exists that we should be deploying along the border in order to do border security in a cost-effective way and to be efficient. You know, there's things going on along the border like our men and women in Border Patrol. Their push-to-talk radios don't work in all locations. Their cell phones don't work. When they're trying to apprehend someone, they don't have any information about what's going on. We should be able to solve that. Now, there are some elements in some areas where a physical barrier does make sense, but in areas where Border Patrol's response time is measured in hours to days, a wall is not a physical barrier.
Is Congressman Hurd's sentiment a similar one that you've been hearing from other Republicans from border states?
From border states, yes, and he's essentially correct on the fact that, you know, you need a smart deterrence. Is that what you're looking for? You know, the political symbolism around the great shiny wall is just that, a very expensive piece of political symbolism, $25 billion. And you know, we should be looking at the ports of entry. 60+% of all apprehensions of anything unauthorized, whether it is smuggling of people or drugs, happens at ports of entry. That's what we should be looking at. We should be looking at targeting the people most responsible for crime along the border, and those are organized crimes on both sides of the border. We should be looking at technology, smart technology, and get away from this really tired, mostly symbolic idea that we have to have a wall because politically that's what we need. Politically, Trump needs a wall. The American people, in terms of their security and sense of safety, need something smart, something fair, and something long-term. We cannot just simply say $25 billion is nothing when other parts of the budget are suffering so much.
Right, Democratic Congressman Raul Grijalva. Congressman, thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.